Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I'm Bill, the company's expert. We're back. I was just doing a live stream about 20 minutes ago on financial type stuff. So we're back. And now that you ever do the thing when like someone's talking to you and you don't want to say, shut up, I got to go, but you just sort of look interested and smile and nod and that kind of stuff. Well, I kind of had to do that a little bit. So that's why I'm a couple minutes late, but that's okay because I'm here now. I'm here now. You're here now. And let's get into this. This is the weekly live stream where we talk about job search. We talk about the gritty reality of job search. If you're between jobs right now, what you might have to be dealing with. And it can be pretty rough. And what to do in this situation. That's what we talk about here. So this is a live Q&A. So I don't have much of an agenda. I don't have any real thing to talk about. I'm simply going off your questions and comments. So if you see my face, you should see a chat box somewhere nearby. If you are a subscriber to my channel, you can get in the chat box and let me know what's up with you, what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with, and I will do my best to help you out. That's what this is all about. So the title, I got to pull that up because I'm equally unprepared for that. The title of this episode, my computer responds, is The Contradictory Perfect Candidate Employers Claim to Want. And this is episode number 60 of Honest HR Nitrous. So you may have noticed that when you deal with recruiters, you deal with hiring managers, and you deal with job search in general, when you're looking at job postings, that a lot of things that they claim to want are contradictory, right? There's a lot of these, a lot. Now, you may have noticed certainly one or two. For example, years of experience is a good thing, especially to recruiters, right? The more years of experience you have doing something, the better they assume you are at doing it, right? Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it isn't, right? Right up to the point where you get overqualified, right? In which case, I'm sorry, you have too many years of experience. We're going with somebody younger, right? That's an example of a contradiction. There's a lot of these, a lot. And I get comments and questions and things from a lot of people on a regular basis that are struggling with this. They don't understand it. And you are right to not understand it because it doesn't make sense. And the reason it doesn't make sense is because you're missing part of the story. One big part of the story is that applying for posted jobs is not the only way to get hired. Far from it. And also that recruiters have, and I'm being fair here, I'm being nice, they have an impossible task. They have to try and spot talent, which is hard for everybody. But in job search, when they put recruiters on the task, unfortunately, they're trying to spot talent on a budget with major time constraints with entry-level people, usually. Most recruiters, title recruiter is an entry-level job. Doesn't mean that all recruiters are entry-level people. They've only been there like a short time, but a lot of them have. So we notice the effects of this, and the effects of this are that things just don't make sense, right? In addition, there's a lot of other shenanigans going on these days. For example, fake jobs, right? You may have encountered that. Job postings where they appear to be advertising for a job. It looks like they're advertising for a job, but you apply for it, and there is no job. They don't interview anyone. They never actually fill the role. They just keep reposting it, right? That's a known thing, right? That's another thing that doesn't make sense. That's part of the picture that you're missing. And as a result, you see a lot of these contradictions. It looks like it doesn't make any sense, right? So I'm not sure if you've struggled with that, if you've observed any of these, or you're dealing with this kind of stuff right now. If you are, certainly get in the chat. Let's talk about it. If you have any questions, I'm here to help you. I don't have any kind of monologue to do or any kind of thing to talk about. I'm simply here to go off of your questions. So we've received none so far. So get in the chat and let me know. There are 25 people here. Thank you for joining me. I just want you to know that you are awesome and that you are highly employable, highly valuable, even though it may not feel like it right now if you're between jobs. It has a weird psychological effect on people where they lose a lot of self-confidence, a lot of self-esteem. They feel unemployable, let's be honest, and that could not be further from the truth. It's all an illusion, but it certainly feels like that, and that's real. So I'm not sure if you're having to deal with that right now. Let me know if you have any questions. This is purely a Q&A to answer questions, so I'm waiting for the questions to roll on in, and we will talk about it. We sort of covered like the contradictory perfect candidate, right? They want someone who is highly qualified, highly experienced, is perfect in every way, has all the soft skills, has the really sound decision making, has the maturity, has the energy, has the maturity of old age, but has the energy of youth, right? And will have all of this and still work for, practically minimum wage. That's what they're looking for, right? It's like the holy grail, and it's a very unrealistic thing to look for. And it's an unrealistic standard to measure against. And unfortunately, a lot of these decisions end up coming down to more practical matters. Like, first of all, if you're going head to head with 800 other applicants, there's some interesting things that come out of that. Secondly, what's most convenient for the recruiter, right? What candidate is not a stretch that if the recruiter recommends them, people will say, really? Because they're unusual in some way. They're breaking the mold. They're not the default candidate, right? And as a result, the recruiter doesn't want to be blamed if that candidate doesn't work out, so they pick the most vanilla, run-of-the-mill person of the bunch, right? And they also involve many people in the decision process. That's why if you go to a job interview and there's like many people there, or you go to multiple rounds of job interview that seem excessive for what you're interviewing for, that's also probably what's going on there too. Gabriel wins the award for the first person in the chat. Thank you, Gabriel. Gabriel says, how would you go about avoiding HR and instead talk to a hiring manager? Oh, excellent question. That is kind of becoming the theme of my channel recently. I end up always talking about this all the time. Okay, so I just want to say a couple of things first. So for everyone else who's here, okay, that first of all, posted jobs, only about 20% of jobs are posted. The other 80% of the jobs that are out there right now are not posted, okay? They're in something called the hidden job market. I got a question on a video just this morning saying, what's the hidden job market? Go to Google or go to ChatGPT or wherever you want to go and look that up, okay? You will do yourself a favor. Now, how do you access a job that's not posted? There are many ways. Most of them involve some form of networking, okay? If you are an introvert, your heart just probably sank hearing that, but it's okay because a lot of the forms of networking are things you can do from your computer on social networking, right? Networking is simply people talking to other people. That's all it is, right? For all human activity, pretty much, that has any kind of effect, you need to interact with other human beings in some way, right? So getting a job is another one of these. You have to certainly talk to recruiters. You have to talk to employers, right? Okay, so you're already interacting with people. This is just a different form of interaction. Now, for hidden jobs, the jobs that are not posted, very briefly, what's going on behind the scenes usually is that, you see, the hiring manager, that term, that's someone who's a boss, right? They run a department or they run a business unit. Okay, so like they're the boss, they have subordinates under them, right? Or a team, if you want to look at it like that. And they're the ones that decide if they need more employees in their team or not, right? So they're the first ones to recognize, okay, the work is piling up And because of the nature of this thing we've got going here, it really seems like the time has come. We're going to have to add another employee. I can't run this team doing overtime all the time. I can't cut out unnecessary work. We have to hire somebody else. Okay. So the person who realizes that is the manager. And the moment they decide they're going to hire somebody, they become what's termed as the hiring manager. They're the ones that's initiating the hiring process. Okay. So what often happens is that then they get someone who has some expertise in HR, in particularly in a subset of HR called recruitment and selection, and that's a recruiter. Okay, so the recruiter assists the hiring manager. They are very much the junior partner in this relationship. The hiring manager is the one that's triggered the entire thing. Okay. Now, if the hiring manager wants to, they can order the recruiter, whether that recruiter is internal to their company or organization, or they can contact an external HR company and get an external HR company to do recruiting for them. Okay. They can say, post this job publicly. Okay. And that's when you see a job posting pop up. That requires a lot of work for the hiring manager. It's also rather expensive because you don't just post a job, you have to actually promote the job. It's usually what happens. And then the recruiter has to deal with like all the applications, has to start filtering, all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. So it's very expensive and cumbersome. And most hiring managers do not like doing this because this is not part of their job, right? So if they haven't posted the job, as Gabriel says, okay, a way to discover that job when it's hidden before it's been posted publicly is to talk to the hiring manager. Imagine if you contacted that hiring manager coincidentally, right when they had just decided, I need a new employee on my team. Okay. Let's say you're a scientist and the hiring manager is the person in charge of a department of scientists in an R&D operation. Okay. So you're a scientist, you're looking for a job as a scientist. The hiring manager is the boss of a group of scientists in a place that employs scientists, right? So it would make sense for you to talk to them, right? They're the type of person that could potentially employ you, right? Okay. Imagine if you contacted them shortly after they had already come to the conclusion they needed to add another person onto their team. And you said, hi, I'm here. My name is X. I'm a scientist. I do great work in this area. I solve problems really well in this area. So if ever you're looking for someone like that to join your team, let me know because I would love to work for you. I know you guys do this type of work. I think that's absolutely exciting, and I'd welcome the chance to speak to you about that. That's all. Have yourself a great day, right? So all you would have to do, in theory, this is the simplest way of doing this, is to get that message to that hiring manager at that time, right? How do you know that they're hiring? You don't. How do you know that that person is the person you should talk to? Well, we have some excellent tools. The approach that I recommend is we have some excellent tools at our disposal, like Google Maps and LinkedIn, which I have demonstrated several times on these live streams, how you use it to discover the hiring managers, right? If you want to know what that looks like, there's a link in the video description under this live stream to a video I've done called How Successful People Get Jobs. And that's where I walk you through how that process works, okay? So that's how you know the person, that hiring manager would be a target that you would want to reach out to, okay? Basically, you look for all the employers around you that have potential to hire someone with your skills. And then within those employers, those organizations, you then use LinkedIn to look at the individuals and you look at what their titles are, what their role is. And then you can not only discover who they are, but you can also contact them directly through LinkedIn. And there's a variety of ways to do this. I have a specific way I recommend, but you could do it a variety of ways. Okay. So I guess that's technically answering Gabriel's question. And then what the question is, what do you say? There's also multiple things you could say. The simplest version is the one I just said a moment ago. Just saying, hello, I'm here, I do this. If ever you're looking for that, let me know. Now, most people that you send that to randomly, they're probably not looking to hire right now. Those are the odds, right? But the odds is that some of them will be looking to hire right now. It could be 5%. It could be 10%. It could be 1%, okay? It could be 0.5%, depending on the industry and depending on what you're going for, right? But the thing is, you know how you can send out hundreds of job applications in the course of a week? That's certainly doable. You can actually, technically, you could send out hundreds in a day. You can contact hundreds of these people in a very short amount of time. Imagine if that message was a template. Hello, I'm here, I do this. If ever you're looking for that, please let me know. I'd love to work for your company. Have a great day. That could be a template, right? So you could blast that out. Now, the odds is that, say, 1%, 5%, 10% of the time, it goes to someone who just happens to be looking for someone like you right now, right? So you're not expecting all 100 or all 1,000 to respond. You're expecting 5%, 2%, 10%, somewhere in there to respond. It would be appropriate for those people. Now, some of those people, they're not actively on LinkedIn, say. They got a profile, but they're not checking it every day. They just kind of forgot about it, right? So, it's going to vary. But you will get some responses. It's a numbers game, just like job applications. And the difference is that when you contact someone like this, are 800 people trying to contact that hiring manager like this? No. You might be the only one. So you are already elevating yourself above the crowd. Okay? That's the theory. That's the idea. Now, I've done this. I've built up a consulting business like this. But there's many different things you can do. You can do this. The other thing I advocate for is learning how to do informational interviews and then requesting informational interviews with some of the more promising ones that would be able to offer you like a dream job, right? So anyway, I could go on, but hopefully that makes sense to Gabriel and to everybody. That's how, in a nutshell, how you would go about doing that. Now, there's many, many ways, because networking is a huge thing. If you're an extrovert, you can certainly go down to events. You can go down to industry events. You can go down to trade association events or association events. There's all kinds of things, and you could do it that way. There's many, many options within this, but this is a quick and easy method that I advocate for that also caters to introverts who don't know anybody, right? It's about discovering the targets, which is really not that hard. It's about mastering creating that message that people will want to respond to if it's applicable to them, right? That's what I put in my course. As you can tell, there's a lot of details to this, so you can get my course if you really want to go in depth with me about how to do that. But that's the principle. Thanks for the question, Gabriel. That was a great question. Super Gamer says, how can I get more interviews for the jobs I apply to? Well, you can be much more effective in your applications. Now, the general rule is that your applications need to be tailored. They absolutely need to be tailored. In this day and age, if you're applying to posted jobs, you need to customize your application to the role. This can be quite cumbersome. There's a lot of work involved. However, the magic weapon for this is using AI, is using things like ChatGPT, right? Now, using ChatGPT is a skill like any other. You have to sort of, refine over a little bit of time, like what commands to give it and how to do it. But it can be very, very effective in customizing your resume or your cover letter or anything else you got to do. So it's specifically tailored for the role, okay? Keywords are a big one. It's well known that, different employers use different terms to describe the same thing. And different recruiters, based on sometimes their limited understanding of things, use different terms to describe the same thing. I remember 20 years ago or something, I had a recruiter, some Joe jackass recruiter, call me up cold and say, hey, we got a job here. It's this company. They do a great job. And what they've done is they've created a logarithm that does this, automatically. And they went on and on about this logarithm that this company did that, gives them a competitive edge. And I didn't want to say, are you trying to say algorithm? It's like, this was before algorithm was really a term that was in common parlance, But, so if you applied to that job, if there was a job and you had to do it in writing, I imagine you have to convert algorithm to logarithm so you don't understand what the hell you're talking about. As an example, that's a stupid example, but you hopefully get the point. You have to speak in their lingo because a lot of recruiters don't understand the meaning of the words that they're charged to find people that have, right? So you have to use their lingo and you have to customize your applications. The better you can do that, the more likely they will select you. They will select your application to bring you in for an interview. Okay? So make sure you're doing that. Evolve English says, hi, just Elijah here. The hidden job market is definitely real. I have a real scenario you might be interested in going off of that aligns with Gabriel's question. Oh, of course it's real. Yeah. I deal with it every day. It's a kind of coincidence too, but I realized the reality of this phenomenon. I had a buyer for a gaming console I sold on Facebook Marketplace. Long story short, I learned this person is the director of a luxury hotel. I've been in contact with them for a couple of weeks and they could potentially be a good contact for possible employment. Finally, I'm going to speak with the director again this evening. The question I have is, this goes on. How should we go about speaking to people we've networked with without being too needy and putting pressure on them that you're going to them for help getting a job? Like we're reaching out very likely because we need a job, but sometimes saying that turns them off when you're still building trust. Okay, well, this is a great illustration of why people need to understand a lot of networking principles, right? Because any moron can send a template message to somebody, right? But if they don't understand what's going on, they don't understand what motivates people, and they don't understand the protocol of how to act and what to say, you can easily blow the entire thing, right? That's why I have a whole course in this, because if you had to explain every principle from scratch, about how people interact, when they do communication, like reaching out to somebody, right? Now, one principle is that if you reach out to someone and then ask for something, like they're not getting anything in return, you're just asking, you're saying dude, give me a job, right? And they don't know you, right? They're going to be reluctant to just do something for you, right? For a variety of reasons, okay? What usually happens, and the principle is that if you reach out to someone, okay, it's some kind, if you want them to respond favorably, you have to propose something that helps them, right? Now, for example, I kind of gave an example of this sort of thing about 5 minutes ago. I was talking about contacting hiring managers in response to somebody's question and saying, hello, I do this. If ever you're looking for that, please let me know. I'd love to work for you. Have a great day, right? Now, what you're doing there, it may sound like you're asking for something. You're saying dude, give me a job. But no, what you're doing is you're offering a solution to their problem. If they're looking for someone like you, here I am as a solution for that. Look no further. I'm right here. And I'd love to work for you. And I have the thing that you're looking for. Right? Right? That's essentially what you're doing. You're saying, if you're looking for this, please let me know. I'd love to work for you. I'm great at that. Right? That's the idea. So you're offering something that's a solution for them. You're offering something that would help them. Right? If, on the other hand, you reached out to someone and you said, listen, I need your help. I need you to help me get a job. Either you employ me or you put in a good word for me or something, right? They're going to be less inclined to do that. They don't know who you are. They're not going to do a bunch of work for a stranger. You might not even say thank you. You might disappear. They might go off and do some work that you requested and then disappear. Somebody requested that I do a live stream on a certain topic. I just did that topic. And that person was nowhere to be found. That's happened to me several times. But I do it because I want to do the live stream. It's kind of an excuse. But you know what I'm saying? It's very, very common. So most people learn that, if a stranger contacts you and tries to get you to do a whole bunch of stuff for them, that's kind of a dumb idea. Not only do you not feel like doing it because you don't know who the person is, but you can get burned on it if you follow their instructions. Right? So you have to be offering something. Okay? That's the idea. Now, if you're between jobs, what could you possibly offer, right? Well, I've already given you one example. Another would be when you ask for informational interviews, something I've talked about publicly on this channel a lot. Why do people accept informational interviews when they do? If they don't know the person, usually it's because of flattery, right? Now, let me ask you a question before you judge my choice of words there. How many times do you get somebody coming up to you saying, hey, listen, I think what you do is fantastic. I think it's mind-blowing how you just know how to do that thing that you do. I would love to learn from you. Would you be able to spare maybe like half an hour? I'd just love to be able to ask you some questions and get your expert advice on how you do that thing. Would that be fine? How often do you get someone coming up to you saying something like that? If you're typical, probably not very often, right? So if somebody comes up to you and they're very polite and they seem like legitimate, there's no red flags, it doesn't seem suspicious in any way. And they say listen, I know that you do this. I can see you do this. I'd love to learn from you. Could you spare half an hour just to answer some questions? Would that be okay? And they're very tactful. They're very polite, and it seems to make sense, right? You'll probably want to say yes, simply because it makes you feel good. You're like, well, thank you for noticing. Yeah, I do know how to do that. And, it is something that's important. So sure, I'll be happy to speak with you, right? So they're getting something out of it, right? It might be something superficial, something silly. But then again, you're not asking for that much. You're asking just, can you spend half an hour with me just, answering questions? Is that cool? Right? So you have to offer something, right? If you want some stranger to want to accept, whatever it is that you're offering, right? You can't go up to someone and say, do all this work for me, please. You don't know who I am, but just, can you do all of this work for me, right? Or you don't know me, but I'm going to need you to trust me like I'm your close family member. Give me a job because I'm good. It just doesn't work like that, right? So there's a lot of principles here about how you relate to people, right? So you got to learn those principles, okay? Now, there's a lot of them. I put them in that course, okay? Because as you can tell, the moment I start talking about it just goes on for quite a while. It's a course. It's not like something you can put in a 5-minute video. But understanding these, which are sort of the foundational building blocks of things like etiquette and protocol, you're halfway to being an ambassador and stuff, or a diplomat, if you learn some of these principles. That's where they come from. So they come from sociology, some from psychology, and some from diplomacy, right? That's where these are from. And it's what a lot of introverts, in my experience, are just not tuned into. Some extroverts are more naturally tuned into this stuff, but a lot of introverts aren't, in my experience. But it's really not rocket science to learn. So learn as much of this stuff, and then when you do networking, you're applying a lot of these principles, okay? If you know the principles, then you can engineer what I need to do. And it applies also for when you're, meeting people in the real world, you're going to an event or a trade show or something, and you're talking to people that could help you. That's another principle, by the way. You need to talk to people who can help you. A lot of people don't feel comfortable talking to people that are higher up than they are. But you know what? The people that are at your level and lower, they can't really help you for a variety of reasons. Usually you got to go to people that are higher up. They're the ones with the power to employ you or do other things for you that would be useful, right? So these are some of the principles involved. Where did I leave off? Mohammed says, I just had a third interview for a job. I indicated to the hiring manager that I can't travel more than 20% of the time. He was telling me, what if we exceeded 20%? How should we approach that? Okay. Oh, it continues. And by the way, Podia has limitations and it's not working everywhere. Better to use Teachable for the writing course. Yeah, thanks for the advice. I have 3 courses. They're using a different platform each. Or you could just do a VPN, Okay, so what was the question? The question was, there wasn't really a question. It was how to approach that. Okay. You're saying, here's my limitation, and they're saying it would be great if you could go beyond your limitation, right? Now, it's not up to me to tell you what to do. You have to decide for yourself if that's really a hard limitation and you can't exceed it, or it's something that maybe you've decided arbitrarily, but you could if they were offering you something of value in return. So the general approach is to, if you're in kind of negotiations with somebody, like not to say a hard no, to kind of like, well, I don't know if I can do that. I might be able to budge on that. I'm not sure. But, let's, like, what would you be able to offer me in return if I can, sort of be flexible and give you what you're wanting, you know what I mean? Like it's a hard no in an interview direct is usually it shuts down things. Now I understand if it is a hard no, okay, like the reality could be a hard no. I just can't do that. But maybe it would be worthwhile to stay in discussions just to see what they could offer you, or perhaps if there was some kind of workaround where they compensated you in some way or they did it in a certain way that maybe you could manage, right? So all things being equal, I would just try and claim you're flexible just to see where it goes. And then remember, if you get to the final stages where they offer you, they give you a job offer, you can decide then and there what your position really is. You can either say absolutely not, or you can say yes, but I'm going to need this. Now, can you do it? And if the answer is no, it's like, okay, well, sorry, then I guess it's a no. And that way you fully investigate it, you see what they're offering, but you still don't get browbeaten into doing something that you don't want to do. What types of companies are still hiring for remote positions? I'm not sure. I know a lot of them still are. But the circumstances that they hire might be different. Like, for example, they might be hiring people that your job isn't remote right off the hop, but they're willing to make it remote after a certain amount of time, almost like a probationary period, once they get a taste of your capabilities and your work ethic and how reliable you are, like how much they can trust you, right? So the position ends up being a remote position, but they might not give it to you right off the hop. I know that that's a thing that we see out there. Thanks, Evolved English. I'm glad you agree. Yeah, you had quite the story there. Did I respond to that? I can't remember. How should we go about speaking to people? Yeah. Vao Xing says, just dropped by to say hello, wish you a chat, happy weekend. Well, thank you. And same to you. Super Gamer says, is it worth doing follow-ups? The answer is yes and no. It is for those handful of things that are like you're really, really set on. It's like a dream job. It's worth turning over every stone, or whatever you call it, whatever the expression is. Going, like any little thing you can do that increases your chances of it working out is worth doing, but not for every job. For most jobs, I would say no, you don't follow up. And the reason I say that is not because following up is bad. It's that it's a question of where do you focus your effort, right? If you had to choose between applying to a new opportunity, or pursuing a new opportunity, like applying for another posted job or doing more networking to try and get stuff in the hidden job market, if you had to choose between that or following up to existing things you've already applied to, I would spend your time, effort, and energy on pursuing new opportunities, right? Okay. If you do interviews, it's good to send a thank you note after an interview. But for applications, do you follow up after applications? I would say no as a general rule, but there are some exceptions maybe if it's like just an absolute dream job. You just want to make sure it wasn't lost, and you want to do the thing where you try and initiate some kind of dialogue with the recruiter. Where you ask them questions, is there an ETA on this? Is there a time when does this listing end? Have you already picked people for the interview? Whatever, stuff like that. It's worth trying for those. As a general rule, no. Evolved English says, thank you so much for your thoughts, great advice, and exhortations. Well, thank you very much, Evolved English. It's nice to talk to people who are open to listening, so that's great. And you asked an intelligent question. Ash says, hello, new sub here. Thank you for doing these live chats. You're absolutely welcome, Ash. Yeah, it's actually, believe it or not, it's actually a lot less work for me to do these than to try and respond to comments by, typing everything out. I'd be here forever. So this is how I respond. I just do the live streams. And I've been generally enjoying it. I'm under the weather these days, so it's a little bit harder on me, but I generally enjoy them. But thank you for saying so. That's very gracious of you. Mohammed says, I tried with VPN as well. It's still not working. Well, I'm sorry, Mohammed. I guess I just can't accommodate you, unfortunately. Yeah, no, I did my first course was my Get Hired course. I did that with Teachable. I had a terrible experience with Teachable, absolutely terrible. And then I did my second course, which is the $100 MBA. I did that with Thinkific, and it was better than Teachable, but it still wasn't great. And then for the third one, I tried a different platform. I tried Podia for the writing course. And it's really not a writing course, it's a communication course, because it's more about what to say rather than, simply just writing. I talk about writing, but it's mainly about what to say. And I don't know what the small print says, but basically this is like all the stuff I had to tack on. I had to learn on top of technical skills to make myself a contender for upper management and executive management positions. That's like everything I had to learn. Usually when you climb the ladder, you have to tack on a lot more than simply technical skills. As I slap my microphone around, I gave my microphone the back of my hand. I don't know what that sounded like. It's got a big foam clown nose thing on it. But no, that's the stuff I had to tack on. There's other things you have to tack on too. If you climb the ladder, you have to tack on people skills. You have to tack on financial skills. Like if you're going to be a general manager and up, like you have to understand money if you're in business, and you have to understand communication. And that's what the writing course is. It's basically everything I had to learn about communication packaged into a course. So if that's useful for anyone, if that's what you're looking for, if you want to get promoted at work or something, or that's your plan, that will be a help if you know this stuff. Yeah, we've reached the end of the chat. So I'm going to talk about my courses if I don't get any other comments. I'm here to answer comments. And I already answered, I believe, the title of today's episode, which was the contradictory perfect candidate that employers claim to want. So check that out right at the beginning of the stream if you're into that. Ash says, so I've been seeing a handful of postings encouraging people to apply, even if they don't meet all the minimum qualifications. Two things on this. One, I feel if you are missing even one or two of all the qualifications, minimum or preferred, the ATS bots automatically reject you. And two, if you meet all of them, you are deemed overqualified. Well, that's let's say hypothetically that that's true, then you're screwed, right? Then no one would be able to qualify, right? If you meet less than all of them, you're unqualified. If you meet all of them, you're overqualified. There'd be nobody. Listen, the thing about the posted job market is that there's all kinds there. There's everything from fake jobs to really crappy jobs to really crappy employers and recruiters that don't know what they're doing, to half decent stuff to some good stuff, right? That's all there. So it's very hard to generalize and say it works like this when you apply for a job, because sometimes that'll be true, but a lot of times it won't, right? Whatever it is that you're saying, that's the problem. So keep that in mind, okay? You apply for a job, it could be a fake job, it could even be like fraud, like there could be like a fraudster that's just trying to do identity theft or something. They're trying to like get your personal information or something, okay, and there are cases where, like you described, it's really that pessimistic, it's like, because they're getting like 1,000+ applications, they leave the posting up for like a couple of weeks and they're getting like thousands of applications. I mean, how do you go head to head with 1,000 other candidates and win? You know what I mean? Like, hey, maybe some people can, and great, all the more power to them, but for regular people like me, I would choose not to play that game. That's why I keep harping on about the hidden job market. It's like, you don't have to play that game, so some of them will be like that. It'll be like an impossible challenge, right? And no matter what you do, it's always going to fall short because they've got 1,000 other people applying. They can be extremely selective and still get away with it, right? And you don't know what they're looking for. I mean, yes, you can take your best guess and respond to the things they've said they're looking for, but there might be a whole bunch of hidden elimination criteria, that they're not telling you, that you're just falling into all the time, right? There's nothing you can do for stuff like that. Instead of trying to hit your head against the wall, trying to win at that game, just move on to the next job, which is in the posted job market, which is not from a company doing these kinds of shenanigans. It's a little bit more reasonable, a little bit more normal. You know what I mean? Because they've studied this stuff for years, and it shows that doing that kind of crap doesn't really give you an advantage. It's some misguided theories from, the study of HR that are very like pseudo-scientific that, would claim that this is superior. It isn't. They don't have any hard evidence that stuff like that produces better candidates. A lot of times they go to great lengths to find like what they consider the perfect candidate. And it's been dictated by like the most unscientific means imaginable. This is what the perfect candidate looks like. And they go to great lengths. They spare no expense to find that perfect candidate, according to them. And that person doesn't work out. That's actually a quite common scenario, right? There's a lot of hocus pocus involved in spotting talent, and in recruitment and selection, like the version of spotting talent for business, for like employees. It's no exception, Internet Vibe says, what do you think of online jobs saying, I want to opt out of AI checking my resume? Should that be checked? I don't think it matters because I don't trust that they would even do that. You know what I mean? What's forcing them to like honor that? How would you know if they've used AI in selecting your thing? You know what I mean? You won't. Right? Like you've got to consider the source here. You've got to consider people's incentives. It's like, what guarantees do you have that they do what they say? None. I mean, if there's any sort of thing you can conclude about looking at the world, looking at the people in it and employers who have, vested interests in different things, they're going to use every tool at their disposal as they see fit, whatever is most convenient to them or whatever makes sense to them, to determine the best candidate. I've never encountered that before where they have like a little checkbox there saying, check this if you want a human to read your, because then everybody would check it, right? But I doubt that they would honor that. They would certainly say you did, but I think between you and me, they wouldn't. But how do you prove it? You can't, right? So what harm is there in them putting that checkbox? They'll be able to get away with it. That might be a very cynical point of view, but my cynicism is based on my experience. In the same way that, HR doesn't represent your interest, they represent the interests of the company. That's well known, right? But yet they want to create this image of like, oh, we're here as your friend, your assistant, your confidant. That's not a thing. You know what I mean? Who pays them? The company. They represent the company's interest. And this is an exception, or this is an extension of that, right? They're paid by the company, one way or another. If they're external HR firm or they're internal, they're paid by the company. Their loyalties to the company. They're not loyalties not to you. And they will say and do anything to get you to reveal what's going on with you in an unfiltered way. That's what they want. That's what they've always wanted. That's what job interviews are all about. They ask you these very deceptive questions, and they give you these, and even I've noticed on YouTube, and I'm not putting anyone down, but I'm just saying that a lot of recruiters who advise job seekers of how to get past a job interview with a recruiter, it's very self-serving. The classic example is when they say, so what is your weakness, right? What do recruiters recommend candidates say? Recruiters recommend that you just answer fully and completely and be honest. And, they claim that, oh yeah, we just want to know because we want to see that you have self-awareness and you're working on yourself. It's like, I call BS on that. Their job is to try and peel the layers back and find out who you are, find out all the imperfections beyond the sales pitch that you've given of being the most amazing candidate there is, right? And, you know what I mean? That's their whole job. So what better way than just they ask you, so what's wrong with you? Why wouldn't we hire you? And you go, well, tell me about it. Well, first of all, I'm pretty much lazy. 2, I really don't like this kind of work, if I'm being honest with you. C, I have a terrible rotten temper. People that always want to collaborate with me, they kind of get on my nerves, So, but I'm working on it, right? And they go, oh, well, thank you very much. That's very forthcoming of you to trust us with that information. And then they eliminate you, right? For the reasons you've just given. So, when they put a little checkbox saying, do you want us not to use AI? I'm sure there's all kinds out there, but as a general rule, I don't believe that they're actually honoring that. You wouldn't know one way or another. So that's my take on it for what that's worth. Mohammed says, is there any other way to get the communication cord rather than Podia? No, sorry. Sorry, there isn't. That's unfortunate. Is it not available in like your country or something? Is that what the issue is? I've never encountered that before, to be honest with you. That course has been out for like a year, 2 years, something like that. And I've never had any complaints like that. So I'm not sure. Reese says, my biggest weakness is that I'm kind of retarded. That's awesome. But I'm working on it, right? That's good. That's good. Hey, it's good to put your cards on the table sometimes, right? Yeah, so that's kind of like, that's the reality of these things, right? And it's unfortunate because a lot of young people or a lot of people that aren't really super experienced with this kind of stuff, they're kind of the victims of that, They're asked a question and they're wanting to be accommodating and they're wanting to be forthcoming. So they want to answer the question fully and truthfully, right? And as their reward, they get eliminated, and that's what pushes people in the direction of giving, shall we say, diplomatic answers. It's not that you're out there to deceive people. It's just that you understand why they're asking that. you understand that it's like an ambush or a trap that they're laying for you, you know? And so you got to try and find ways of wriggling out. You don't want to seem like combative or like, no, I refuse to answer that question, because that's not going to get you a pass. You know what I mean? You're going to be eliminated for different reasons now. You're not cooperative, right? So you want to be seen to give like a legitimate answer, but you at the same time, you can't fall into these traps, right? That's what a lot of job interview question answers are about, because everybody can look bad if you just sort of cherry pick like the bad aspects of them and like, parade those, in like a half an hour interview or something. And everyone could look really, really good, no matter who you are, if you just cherry pick all the good things, right? This is well known. So your job in the job interview being essentially a sales pitch for you, is to accentuate all the good things, and especially the good things that they are looking for, that they regard as good things, while simultaneously you downplay and deflect all the negative stuff. You want to hide all of that as much as possible. And that means giving sort of very creative answers and specific answers to some of these ambush type questions that they'll ask you. There's a lot of them. So Reese says, my biggest weakness is that I'm kind of retarded. And it's a good one. But I make up for that by trying not to be. You see? There's using the old bean John, right? You see, that's the kind of, you can tell that you've been around the block a few times, right? Can't pull the wool over your eyes. Got to get up pretty early in the morning to pull one over on you. That's good. That's good. Ash says, absolutely agree with you. Maybe I'm just encountering most, if not all, ghost jobs or / fake jobs, or jobs they already have someone in mind, internal or whatnot, but post the job as a formality. I've been trying to get better at networking per your encouragement about the hidden job market and searching local companies through Google Maps. I'm still new at this. Well, you're on your way, Ash. Like, listen, the problem is that it's a lot to learn, especially if no one's ever like told you about this, or you've never actually done any of it before. That's the thing. For those people, it's going to be a lot to learn. The good news is that it's not particularly hard to learn. It just, there's a lot of principles there, but you learn by trying things. You learn by doing that. Like at the end of the day is how you learn the stuff. And, I think a realistic thing for a lot of people is that, like, hopefully, because there's so many jobs in the hidden job market, you can come across something. Okay. But if you are forced to learn this stuff now, when normally it wouldn't be on your radar, it'll certainly help you for the rest of your career, this kind of thing. Because, like, there's a principle where, people, and I've talked about this before, people, if you're hiring someone, you're putting them in charge of something, right? And, the problem with hiring a stranger and putting them in charge of something of yours is that you have to trust them. And it's hard to trust a stranger. It just is, Like, I've run businesses, and, the business is like a business to me, or to the managers. In a sense, it's like your own home. It's like your thing. You work at this. Maybe you started it yourself. Maybe you're an owner operator or something. So like you literally created it yourself, right? So just like a house that you would buy or a home you live in, like it's yours. It's your personal thing. It's the source of your income. It could be the source of your retirement. It could be the source of the legacy you give to your children. Like, when you die or whatever, you give them like, here's your inheritance, You know what I mean? Like, it's valuable to you. To the employees, it's just a workplace. They don't really care about it that much. They switch jobs. They don't give it a second thought. It's another workplace, right? But to you, it's your personal thing, and it's very precious. And especially if you've built it into the thing that's making you a lot of money or whatever, it's very valuable. Now, you're in a situation where you can't run it all yourself. You have to like hire other people and put them in charge of bits of it, right? And it's almost like hiring people to put them in charge of part of your house. You're in charge of the basement, you're in charge of the roof, you're in charge of the upkeep of the exterior, you're in charge of cleaning the inside, doing the dishes, all that kind of stuff, maintaining all the appliances, whatever, right? You're putting people in charge of this stuff. Now, if you pick the wrong person, the person comes in who's an employee and says, you know what? I don't give a rat's ass about this place. I'm only here to get as much out of it as I possibly can while doing as little work as I possibly can, right? You know what I mean? Like if you take that too far and someone hires you and puts you in charge of something important, let's say you put them in charge of the roof, and every month you should be checking the roof, making sure it doesn't leak and, fixing it as you go, or, you know what I mean? And it turns out you haven't been doing that properly, right? So all of a sudden the roof leaks, it ruins the interior, ruins the basement, you can't live in the house anymore, right? You managed to destroy the entire thing. Huge, huge cost to like fix that, right? That's how employers feel, at least the ones that have like a stake in it, the ones that are above a certain level. That's how they feel, right? So, they're willing to hire strangers for like the really low level stuff, because you hire an employee, there's a supervisor standing over them. If they don't do their job, or they end up being like unqualified and they lied, or they end up having like major personal problems and they got, they have a lightning quick temper and they're like, harassing people or whatever. You just get rid of them and you replace them. It's not the end of the world. They were supervised. You sort of did some damage control, right? But imagine if you're hiring someone more important, right? Like a professional level job, where now, you go and you talk to our customers by yourself without us being around. If you hire a stranger, it's hard to see who that person really is. You put them on the job, it turns out they go and they slag you off to the customers, they damage the reputation of the company. It's like a huge problem, right? So, what's the solution? The solution is, if you know the person or know of them, or you have like a solid personal recommendation from someone you trust that they're good and that they won't abuse their privileged position of being your employee, that's the person you want to go through. You want to go for. Oh, you have to forgive me. I'm sick, so I'm not all there today. I took some medications, making me feel a bit lightheaded. But but that's the reality, right? So a common thing that I hear when I talk to like, job seekers and stuff, and I get it, is like this thing of like, oh, it's who you know. And it's usually talked about in the sense of like corruption and nepotism and cronyism and, all that kind of stuff. And that's not really what it is. It's not that they're trying to exclude anyone and everything. It's just that you don't see like what their priorities are. Yes, technical skills are important. Yes, soft skills are important. But the thing that nobody ever mentions, to varying degrees, depending on what job you're going for, they need to trust you. Right? And that's like a big thing. It's hard to get around. Because how do you trust someone when you first meet them? The only real way I know of is, if you don't know the person, but you need to trust them, it's by having someone close to you that you trust say, I've worked with them before. I know them. I've known them for years. Trust me, they're good. I'm staking my own personal reputation on this, vouching for them, right? Now, a way around that, that's one of the things with the hidden job market. A way around that is if you contact hiring managers, okay, you reach out to them, right? You can get some measure of trust by doing that. Not a ton, but you can get a bit. Certainly more than like a candidate who applied for a posted job. Because here you are reaching out to this person. You're doing it entirely of your own accord, right? Especially if you're not really asking for anything, that's self-serving. You're saying like, hey, I'm into this, you do that. Maybe we could partner up. It's, pretty benign, it's almost like volunteering. That's why people like volunteering experience on a resume, because it shows what the person actually cares about. They're not getting paid for it. The only reason you would do it is if you liked it, you know? That's the reasoning. So, oh, you volunteer doing this. Okay, you must honestly want to do this, and this. You know? There's no other reasoning why you would do that. You know, so that's the other reason that you can get further on the hidden job market than you can get in the posted job market, because, you know, you're always suspicious when you're in the posted job market. Everybody assumes you're only here for the money. You may say you care about the joke, but you're here for the money, right? That's a real barrier to a lot of things. And if you say anything in a job interview that sheds suspicion on, like, you know, you care mainly about what you're getting out of it, you don't really care about the company or about this work, you know, those are all like major red flags. Okay. Once again, I went like right off on a tangent, and I need to get back to the questions here. Okay. Where did I leave off here? Ash says, I've been trying to get better at networking. Okay. Yeah. You're still new at this. Okay. I've been working remote since 2020 until last year. Haven't had much luck searching local in my field of healthcare operations. What are your thoughts on doing this method if you live away from the city? Not a lot of opportunities where you live. Well, like, okay, if you're away from the city and there's no opportunities around you, your choices are limited. You either have to do remote work, right, which really opens it up, or you are restricted to the limited physical opportunities that are in your geographic proximity, right? I mean, there's just no magic third way that I know of if the jobs just aren't there and you can't do remote stuff, right? What I would do, just as a general rule, if you're in that situation, is I would look further and further afield. So if you're in like medical devices or whatever you are, healthcare operations. So, okay, obviously you can look at like direct healthcare stuff, like whatever it is. Say you're a nurse or something, I don't know. You know, you apply to hospitals, you apply to doctors' offices, you know, that kind of stuff. You apply to anything to do with nursing, right? Directly. Well, maybe there's other industries or classes of jobs out there that use all the skill set of nurses that aren't working in nursing, okay? Like, this is a lot more common than you might think. Another story I've told a long time is my first career job out of university, I took engineering. Now, what do you do when you take engineering? You become an engineer, right? That's the standard career path. Just like if you go to med school, then you usually become a doctor, right? But what I found is that when I came out of university, when I was like looking around for jobs, yeah, you could go the sort of engineering path and become an engineer, where you would do design in an engineering firm. But there were a lot of other companies that were looking for people that had engineering degrees that the job had nothing to do with engineering. So that's what I did. I went into the railroad supervising people that repair locomotives on the strength that I had an engineering degree. And it was like, what? You know, yes, this is technical. It's like electrical and mechanical systems, but I'm not designing anything and I'm not working with engineers, you know? So that really opened my eyes to like a lot of career paths. They tend to, you can go in straight lines down a career path, or you could go like just all over the place. So if you have skills like in patient care or maybe the technical side of healthcare, like in medical devices or R&D, or, you know, the specific type of technology that you're dealing with, you know, I don't know, you can go further afield. Maybe you leave healthcare entirely, but you're looking at jobs that still require all those skills, right? Now, I don't know what they would be, okay, but that's up to you to figure out. But you could start by doing all those Google searches, like when you're in Google Maps and you're looking at your geographic region, you would type in nursing, you type in healthcare. But beyond that, you know, it's a matter of brainstorming, like, okay, what other industry could use this? You know, Chat GPT, do a Chat GPT session would be the obvious thing to start out with. Just say like, okay, I have these skills. Besides this role or this industry, what could I be qualified for? You know, maybe the names are different, but what else would it be? And then you start doing searches for those industries and those types of employer, and then you pursue it with them. Go and do some informational interviews with people in the industry, people that have your skill set. Do a search on LinkedIn, a people search for people that have your skill set that might be working in other than nursing or healthcare or whatever. And if you find these people, go and hit them up for an informational interview and say wow, you've got a really interesting career. It's kind of non-linear. You took this and then you ended up going here. Tell me about that. How did you get the idea? Did it just fall in your lap, or was it more calculated? Doing all that kind of stuff would probably really help. So think about that kind of stuff. Try and pursue those kind of ideas. Mohammed says, I found a way to buy the course using very specific VPN just now. Okay, good. I'm glad. Because I hadn't heard that before. Now, all these courses, they have videos, right? So hopefully, I'm not a technical expert. I used to be 25 years ago, but not anymore. Can you do the videos over a VPN? It's not going to slow it down to the point where it won't work or something. You can adjust the resolution of the videos and make them smaller in size, and so they'll hopefully work over a VPN. But that's good, Mohammed. Guido says, how many hours of actual deep work do you think most people get done in a day? It seems to me it's usually much less than 8, even for good employees. Well, I do about 12 for a start. It depends what we're talking about. If you talk to entrepreneurs, okay, people that are self-employed, they'll laugh when you say 8 hours, amateur, you know what I mean? It's, it really varies. And if you work in the government, I think it's at least where I am, I get the impression it was more 7 officially, but of that 7, how many are they working really hard? I don't know. I wouldn't want to guess. That's going to vary, obviously, but then you go to some other jobs and people work damn hard. When I was at the railroad, when I was in my 20s, I volunteered for, what a stupid thing, I volunteered for the weekend midnight shift. So it was a 24/7 operation. So you were 12 hours on, 12 hours off, but you really weren't 12 hours on because you had to get there early and do a briefing and all this kind of stuff, a turnover. So you were really there 13, 14 hours. And then you had 10 hours off kind of thing. So you basically went home, you slept, you came back, right? And then you were back on and you were running this giant facility, so I remember the rule was I could do up to 15 hours, no problem, but I couldn't do 16 because if I tried to do 16, I always got a raging headache. I could do 15, up to 15, you could set your watch to this. I didn't know what it was, but that was my experience. But I don't know what people typically do. I know that the average hours of the people work have gone up in the last 20 years, at least in North America. I assume the world over. I'm not sure. But then the weekend midnight thing, but then you got 4 days off, right? Half of that was spent moving your sleep schedule around. But it was interesting lifestyle. I think everybody's got their own version of the job they did when they were young that's what they cut their teeth on and, that kind of thing. So that was mine. Guru Prasad says, what does it take to get hired in a totally new domain industry? How to crisscross this industry barrier? Instance, transition from an HR manager from the IT industry to an HR manager into energy or semiconductor. Well, that's not really too much of a jump because you're still doing the same thing. It's just you're working for a different parent company, as it were, right? That's called career change, and people do it every day, Guru Prasad. The way you do it is you do it through networking. That's very well established. The reason is because what's the first thing that recruiters ask? They ask, how many years of experience do you have in this job? Well, if you're going for a job that you've never been in before, you have 0, right? So a lot of the time, the next thing out of their mouth will be, well, if you have 0 years experience in this job, what makes you think you're qualified to do it? Right? Which is an insulting question, but still, that's what we encounter. So the way you change careers is usually you go talk to a hiring manager, and if they see if they see certain things, first of all, if they have a job to offer, right? Then, if they see enthusiasm, passion for doing this role, they see that you have all the required technical skills, like all the constituent technical skills under the hood, you have them all, you know? You might have good communication skills, you're easy to deal with, right? And a consequence of the enthusiasm and passion will be that you know a bit about this job. You've never been in it, but you know a bit about what it entails. So you can have an intelligent discussion with the hiring manager about it, right? They know all about the job. They've probably been in it for years, and then they were promoted above it, so now they're supervising people in that role, right? It's like, say, being a teacher and talking to a principal. Usually principals of a school, they've been teachers for many years, and then they get to be the principal. Almost like a judge in a court, they've been a lawyer for many, many years. They've been a prosecutor in the trial, or like a defending counsel, whatever, for many, many years, and then they become the judge, right? So you're talking to someone who's been in the role themselves for many years, and then now they're in charge of people in the role, right? So if you know a bit about the role itself, even though you've never been in it, you can have an intelligent discussion with them. You can show them that you get it. You understand what it involves. You understand the priorities of someone in that role, right? So they get the impression that, like, oh, okay, you know, it seems like if I put you in that role, you'd be able to handle it. You kind of get it, you know? You have all the skills. You understand what it's about. You know, you seem to be suited to it. It's like, okay, so if they have something that they can offer you that's kind of low risk, because they're still taking a chance on you, but, you know, like maybe something part-time or something not super important, almost like a probationary type thing, a lot of times they'll give it to you. They'll say, like, you know, depending what it is. Obviously, this is a general kind of thing here, but, you know, they'll say, okay, you know, I need someone in this role. You know, I'm going to give you a chance, you know, and they're going to watch you. And if you learn quickly and, you know, you are a good employee, then you'll probably get that foothold in there, and then they'll likely promote you upwards to like a more permanent thing or a full-time thing or whatever it is within a short amount of time, right? I mean, I kind of did that with sort of with being a teacher, because I mean, I'm not a teacher. I've been in the private sector my whole life, but I was asked to go back and do some teaching in university, and I did. But I was saying, like, hey, I've never been a teacher before. I mean, if you're expecting someone to like know, you know, like have a degree in education and know like all the different methods of teaching or something, that's not me. You know, I mean, I have subject matter expertise, but I'm not a teacher. Now, I think I can handle it. You know, I mean, I've given keynote speeches and all this kind of stuff, but, you know, and you know what I mean? But full disclosure, I mean, I've never taught in a classroom before. And so they're like, okay, well, you know, we didn't realize that, but, you know, we'll still, you know, here, we'll give you like one course, and, you know, for you and for us, just to see how it goes. And I said, sure, you know, whatever. And I did it. Then they offered me a whole bunch more. So, you know, it's that kind of thing. You get your foot in the door by demonstrating these things, like there's like 5 things, and it can go from there. Okay, so that's how usually people change careers, right? Some version of that. Amazed says, blessed Good Friday. Yes, and to you too, Amazed. How would you approach managing multiple interviews at once, especially when your top choice company is moving slower than the others? Well, it's very simple, Amazed. It's like first come, first serve. They're all independent. So if let's say you're in the final stages of interviewing with company A, but then a company B says, we'd like to talk to you. You say, okay, I'm free. You go down, you do your interviews with company B, you pursue them as if there was no company A. So you give it your best shot. You do everything in your power to get an offer for company B, right? And then if, say, company A all of a sudden gives you an offer before you've got to the end of the process with company B, you're still in the running. Maybe they said, we want to bring you in for one more interview, but it's going to be a couple of weeks. In the meantime, company A is now giving you an offer, right? It's like you just pursue them completely independently, right? And if company A offers you something really decent and you have no other offers in the bag at that point, you say yes and you take it, right? Now, maybe work starts in a couple of weeks, right? In the meantime, you have a chance to complete the process with company B. Maybe they give you an offer. So now you got a job you've agreed to, that you've agreed to start in a week or something, and you've got a second offer just now. So I would negotiate company B's offer as if it was the only thing that you had, and see where it goes. And then if you can get a better offer than what company A is providing, and then it looks like you have the option of, if you could choose, you could say to company A, I'm sorry, I've received another offer. Now, you could give them the opportunity to match it or exceed it. Or you could just say, I'd rather work there, so I'm just going to take that instead. And it pays me more too. Goodbye. Right? You have no loyalty to any of these people. They act entirely in their own self-interest, and they will drop you in a nutshell. In a, that's not the right word, in a heartbeat. There we go. So you behave the same. Nothing matters until it's signed, sealed, and delivered in writing. And even then, it's not guaranteed. They can always rescind the offer before you start. Or you could start working and they fire you after a month. You know what I mean? There's no guarantees. So you have to regard all these things as being completely independent, and nothing precludes looking at other things. Does that make sense? That would be my advice for how to handle that. They can move at whatever pace they want, but you move at your pace, right? Guru Prasad says, cross-industry transfers or transitions should be appreciated, I feel. Yeah, I agree. You see, I'm a generalist. I've worked across 5 industries. And there's a special place in my heart, I guess you could say, for people who have cross-functional experience. They've worked in multiple industries because they bring unique insights that a lot of people don't recognize. The first thing is they've seen many different ways of solving a problem, right? The problem is when you get people that have just only been in one place their entire career, only one industry or only one company, they've only ever seen one way of solving problems. So all of a sudden they're confronted with a problem they don't know how to solve. They're screwed. Meanwhile, you get somebody that doesn't have the years of experience in this company or in this role, but they've worked across several industries. They've seen multiple approaches and multiple solutions. And something I've noticed is that you get people over here in this industry struggling with how to solve a certain problem. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to these people, that same problem was completely solved over here in this other industry 40 years ago, But nobody has bothered to cross-pollinate and bring this solution here into this industry here. That's where generalists can shine. If you're a generalist, you might even be able to say something like this to a hiring manager. They might even believe you. When you can say, you can do this. This is the value of working across, different industries or different companies, because you've seen multiple approaches to solving the same problems, or a range of problems. And in that sense, you have an advantage over someone that's just been here their entire career, right? The famous example that for me was back in the day, in 2008, General Motors got into some trouble. The American car maker, I worked for a division of theirs, and not making cars, but making locomotives and stuff. And, their CEO exemplified it. Their CEO was an accountant who had only ever worked at General Motors. So it's well, yeah, when you've only seen one way of doing things, it's kind of hard to change, That's why they tend to hire external candidates when they want new ideas. They want solutions to things that they're struggling with. They bring in a new person from the outside instead of promoting internally. Yeah, so I agree with you, Guru Prasad. They should be appreciated more. But you try like communicating that to people that have only been in one place. They don't understand what you're talking about. They don't see the value in it. Instead, they look at it as like, oh, you're someone who isn't loyal to their organization or something. It's like, no, you're not getting it. Oh, my voice is on the verge of crapping out. Ash says, I have a third round interview coming up next week. Yay. But tell me, why would any employer want to have a 4-hour in-person interview with executives? Seems excessive. Haven't encountered this before. That does seem a bit excessive. If I had to guess, I would say this. I've done lots and lots of informational interviews with like lots of executives. And for me, the first hour you talk to people, you can almost delete because their guard is still up. They've got a game face on. They're not really speaking freely. You're not seeing the real them, and they're not being completely honest with you. I mean, they may never be completely honest with you, but they've really got like a game face up. They got a mask on. After you talk, especially if they don't know you, and this is like in a case where you don't know them and they don't know you. The first hour, it's very formal. It's very sort of calculated. After an hour, generally speaking, I find that, the mask comes off. People let their hair down a bit, if you have any hair. And, they speak more freely. They're a bit more honest. They're a bit more forthcoming. They talk to you about what really went on, what they really thought, stuff like that. You get much more out of it after that first hour. That's where the real value is, right? So it could be something to do with that, right? And also you get more comfortable. It's less uptight, formal kind of thing. You just you're more used to it, right? After about an hour, so people act a bit more real. It takes energy to keep this like game face on for a long time. So it could be something to do with that, or maybe they just have that many activities planned. I'm not sure. They figure if each person asks half an hour worth of questions with you and interacts with you for half an hour, you multiply that by like 5 people or something, and that's going to take some time, right? After they get past all the default stuff at the beginning and the default stuff at the end. Maybe that's what they're thinking. I couldn't guess beyond that. I have not encountered that before, but you see, the thing is, the way they hire executives generally, in my experience, is you have lots of like just discussions. You go out to dinner, you go out for coffee, you just spend a lot of time and you talk about, the person's past. You talk about like, what have you done? Why did you do it that way? What do you think? What's your opinion about different things and what motivates you to do it this way? Why would you take that approach instead of this? Like, help me to understand like where you're coming from. It's like those kind of discussions, right? And, or you discuss current things. You say, what would you do in this and that and why? Let me know where you're coming from. Why do you say that? It's those kind of discussions, and those take a long time, right? So you put in lots of hours with people. But you do that because then you really get a much better view of who they actually are than, say, something like job interviews, where it's like these stupid, formal, borderline insulting questions, that are so basic, right? And then, of course, the exchange is so artificial. Nobody really answers truthfully. It's just a canned question. You get a canned answer, and then you repeat that a few times. So it could be something like this. They're wanting to really get to know. If they want to get to know how much you know about different things, how you would go about doing a job, why you would do it that way, that's going to take a long time to get through. So you need at least a couple hours for that. Guido says, in my industry, I feel like the time of most people is filled with meetings, which sometimes seem like work evasion tactic. Oh, absolutely. It's called large organization culture, where like something like 90% of your time is spent covering your butt so that, because you're paranoid about being blamed for something, right? So the way I've observed that in multiple places is like, you're just spending your whole day, like it's the company is basically a building full of people that spends their entire day writing emails to each other, not doing any real work, just writing emails. Everything has to be in writing. You have to copy the boss on absolutely everything, just in case you're accused of like doing something or taking a decision on your own without approval. It's retarded. It's really backwards and stupid. And the only time anyone would ever even understand that or detect it is if you've worked in small companies, where you don't have any of that crap. You generally have to trust in people more, and they work more independently in a small company because you don't have the manpower to like always stand over people and micromanage everything they do. You have to trust that they go and do their job when your back is turned. So you want to talk like empowerment, that's where it is. It's in smaller companies. In large companies, the culture is a lot of times is based on not empowering people below a certain level. We don't want them to take initiative. We want them to ask for approval, ask permission for everything and get everything approved. So it all bottlenecks through the people up here. It's stupid. It's self-defeating. It's a terrible way to run things. I know why they do it. There are some legitimate reasons why you would have to do things that way, like with corporate governance and stuff like that. But it still doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, it's extremely inefficient, and it almost wipes out all of the gains that you get with economies of scale. That's the other interesting thing. I could go into that. That's a really interesting discussion, but I'll get back to questions here. Ash says, any advice on navigating this? Sorry for all the questions, but thank you so much. So Ash says the 4-hour thing. Hopefully I've given you enough on there. Let me know if you need more on the 4-hour thing. Guru Prasad says, ironically, these frontline recruiters on pre-screening calls always try to lowball or discourage you from across the domain, whereas their superiors or decision makers are quite considerate initially. Yeah, because once again, we return to the fact that companies are entirely self-serving. It's like, they ideally would want you to be an expert that works for nothing, and makes and places the incentives of the company before your personal incentives. That's what they want. That's this mythical perfect candidate that, is the topic of this episode of Honest HR Nitrous. That's what they're looking for. And it's mythical. You won't find it. They sometimes succeed in brainwashing younger people into being exploited like this. They'll tell you that, oh no, this is normal. And, everyone does it like this, when you're innocent and ignorant and you don't know any better. You know what I mean? But once you grow up a bit, you're in your 30s and stuff, it's harder to pull that one over on employees. A lot of people change careers. Like it happens every day. It's very, very common. But if you're looking at recruiters, they don't know how to deal with that because they measure everything in years of experience. So how do you measure somebody's competency when they've just changed careers? They can't, right? It requires actually understanding what's required for the role, and they don't because they're not familiar with the roles that they're recruiting for. Hiring managers have a better sense of that. And that's why if you're changing careers, you talk to the hiring manager, never the recruiter. Right? I mean, I wouldn't say never, but you would always want to talk to the hiring manager. You would rarely want to talk to a recruiter if you're changing careers. Guru Prasad, these frontline tunnel vision recruiters write negative feedback about me is what I suspect. Yeah, well, look, you have no control over them, Guru Prasad, just like you have no control over what some idiot does. In life, you're going to encounter idiots, you're going to encounter jerks, right? People that are mean and people that are stupid. and they're going to judge you, and they're going to have their opinion about you. And there's nothing you can do to change that. You can do your due diligence and try and be nice to everybody and try and explain and try and work with people. But beyond that, you have no control over their opinions or what they do or what they say, right? The good news is that you don't have to deal with them, okay? If you're just trying to get a job, you can go outside of recruiters. That's abundantly clear. I've already talked about that several times today. You should know that. Focus your efforts there, right? And then just don't worry about it. These people a lot of recruiter is an entry-level job. A lot of them really don't understand how hiring and careers work. They think they do, but they don't. They've taken a 6-month course that's taught them certain principles, some of which are pseudoscience, right? Some are valid, but some are pseudoscience. That's what they've been taught. And they're young, so a lot of them have no real personal experiences of their own to draw from, right? And that's evidenced by the fact that they're never allowed to be anywhere near when they're selecting a manager, like a senior manager. When a corporation, like a company, especially a large company, when they hire like a manager, like someone at the general manager level or up, right? Someone who has to really make decisions and can really do a lot of damage if you get the wrong person in there. They don't allow recruiters anywhere near those decisions. They're used as grunts, they're used as clerks, and that's about it. They're there to consult on the labor laws so that, you dot the T's and you dot the I's and cross the T's when it comes to filling in their employment contract, but that's it. They're not allowed to decide, who goes into those roles because they're not equipped. It's the managers, it's the executives and stuff that decide those things. So when it's really important, those decisions get taken away from recruiters. Recruiters are only allowed to make those decisions when it comes to junior employees, like worker level and stuff, where, if you make the wrong choice, it doesn't really matter that much. So don't sweat it, okay? And there's plenty of fish in the sea. You can deal with recruiters at other companies. There's plenty of other employers out there. Amaze says, thank you for your candid answer and opinion. Employers often work in their best interest and the experience can be cold. Job candidates should seek their own best interest too. Seems fair. Yes, it is. And I did a video like earlier this year, I think, like in January or whatever, where I talked about school. And the problem is, like school, one of the things that it trains young people to do is to conform. You have to follow the rules. You have to ask for permission. You got to stay in your lane. All this kind of stuff. Like it maybe is not intentional, but that's the effect of school. You've been conditioned for years and years and years. You don't just get an idea and go and do something. You have to get it approved. And if this person says that you shouldn't do that, then you know not to do it, right? And it's amazing how much of an effect this has on some people. I've worked with a lot of 20-something people in various capacities. And it's like, when I would say something like, okay, go out and contact hiring managers, they'd be like, what? Like, you could do that? It's like, yeah. I mean, hello, you're young, I'm old. You guys know social networking much more than I do. You see how you can discover people and you see how you can connect with them and message them. You're like, I never thought of that. I mean, I can't talk to these people. They've got jobs. It's like, what? Just because nobody told you could do that, they're waiting for permission to do this because they've never been given permission, Now, obviously some people don't have this, but a lot of people do. And in my experience, it seems like that was burnt into them in school, And I kind of get it, but at the same time, that's not a good effect, That trains you to be a drone. That trains you to wait in line. And a lot of like the hiring process, this is where the real world hits you, like it hits you like a slap in the face. It's like there's nobody telling you what to do, first of all, right? There's nobody saying, okay, now you do this. And the only people that might be trying to do that are recruiters who work for companies, who work for employers. They're not on your side. They're on the employer's side. They will assist you to be exploited by the employer. Now, that's a bit of a cynical view, but that's basically where their incentives are, right? they're not in your court, but some of them will underhandedly position themselves as like being your friend and, having your interests at heart, which they don't, like that's the problem, right? So wisening up to this, it's not having a cynical view of the world. It's just recognizing everybody's incentive structure, right? What do you get rewarded for? Do you get rewarded if I'm happier? No, quite the opposite. You get rewarded if I take a crappier deal and I work for you for less money. I've also seen corporate efforts to brainwash a workforce. I saw that quite early on. And I've also been in positions where I see the direct advantage of that being a thing. And it's really conflicting, So, it's like the advice I would have, like, for people, like for my own kids, would be to like wisen up to this. Recognize these situations for what they are. These people are not helping you. They're serving their own interest. Now they're interested in you in as much as you are a solution to their problem, right? But no more. Guido says, would love to hear your thoughts about economies of scale at some point. Yeah, well, what I was starting to say earlier, very briefly, was that, you have small companies and you have big companies, right? An advantage of big companies, one of their advantages is economies of scale, right? So, you tend to be more efficient when you're bigger because you can get things like volume discounts and you can do things in batches and, stuff like that. So it tends to be more efficient as you're big. But as you get bigger and bigger, certain other things increase that lead to inefficiencies. Like when you get a whole bunch of people all trying to work together and, there's petty differences of opinion and of culture and, like this kind of stuff. And so as you get more and more people involved, it gets less and less efficient, right? So you got sort of some other principles working against you as you bulk up, right? So, like I'm not an expert in this, but I've been exposed to this and I've seen it firsthand where, you have to weigh, like, if we bulk up here, if we sort of go upscale, are the advantages going to outweigh the disadvantages? Because there's both, right? And a lot of times it's a very narrow margin. It obviously varies by industry and by situation, but a lot of times it's a very narrow margin. You should have all these economies of scale, but they've all been negated by all these other things, including having to hire a lot more people that all don't get along and don't communicate well, and the information flow is far from perfect. Like if you come right down to the thing that I talk about on Mondays, like having a side hustle, where you're a one-person company usually, where you've got everything in your head. You got the marketing, you got the operations, you got the accounting, you got the finance, you got everything all in one head. It's like in some ways you are incredibly efficient. You don't have to spend any time on training or informing different parts of the operation, what's going on with, other parts of the operation. It's all in one head, It allows some incredible efficiency. Once you start adding people, then you have to spend time in meetings. Then you have to spend time disseminating information, reporting. Here's what's going on. Discussing, okay, here's what's going on with you. Here's what's going on with me. Now, what is the way forward? I understand half of it. You understand the other half. Let's try and see if we can figure out a way to go. That's a lot more efficient than one person just having it all in their head, right? So it's interesting when you are encountering business decisions about what to do and how to respond to different like conditions in the business environment. You got to take all this into account. So it's really not as black and white as some people would have you believe. A lot of the efficiencies are wiped out by simply the organization of people and how they work together. That's why areas like organizational theory are really, really interesting, because when you realize just how inefficient a lot of companies are, there's like tremendous gains to be made there. We're not talking about like, boosting efficiency by 1 or 2%. We're boosting efficiency by like 60 to 80% just by certain changes, incredible types of, because we're so bad at it. Anyway, that's another discussion. Guru Prasad says, is my suspicion right or just my misplaced snap judgment of these recruiters being super biased? Well, biased is kind of a weird word. It means kind of whatever you want it to mean, If you mean that they're discerning and they're looking for something specific, the answer is yes. If you mean biased in that they are violating legal laws of the land by wanting to employ certain people over some other people, and that's actually been explicitly stated as being illegal, then that's another thing, right? The whole point of selecting somebody is you're going to be biased in some way, technically. You're going to value something over something else. Now, whether you're making the right judgment is purely in the eye of the beholder. And every organization has their own way of placing value on an employee, right? Now, if you meant it in the sense that they're violating laws, like anti-discrimination laws or human rights laws or something, I would say, no, you can't just instantly look at them and say, you're clearly breaking the law by not hiring me. It's like, nah. You'd have to really do some convincing to convince me of that. But are they biased? Absolutely. They're in the business of being biased, of placing something above something else. Whether or not anyone else would agree with that, that's their entire job in recruitment and selection. The key is to associate yourself with people that place importance on what you have, right? And if these people just don't think like that, then you go somewhere else and you deal with people who do, that see your value, that say, I pick you over all these other people because I believe that like you have what we need. That's what the purpose of job search is to find people who think like that and get in front of them and make a good case for yourself. I have to sign off soon because my voice is going. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm going to try and get through these here first. Internet Vibe says, what do you think is more... I'm going to change my camera brightness because I just noticed that. Hopefully that's a bit better. That might be a bit much, but what can you do? It's getting duller in here, so... once again, I want to wish everyone a happy Good Friday if you're into that kind of thing. Okay, Internet Vibe says, what do you think is more worth it in an interview, the way you dress or the way you answer? Well, they're both important. If I had to choose one, I would say the way you answer. But how you dress is pretty important because if you walk in there looking like the person, all you got to do now is not talk yourself out of a job. If you go in there and you look like you're really not the person, you don't fit, you don't get it, right? Then you got to change their minds. That's hard. Guru Prasad says, Bill, your role models, icons, philosophy, any source you always follow since quite young that helped you, what are you are today? You want all that from me? Okay, well, let me answer this. This continues. Do you get carried away by today's current affairs, news, chaos like me? What's your screen time day like? Okay, here's what I would say. Now, I don't want to talk about politics. I don't do that. But since you're asking me, what I'll say is this, okay? Listen, I'm fortunate in that I'm old, okay? I know that sounds weird, but what that means is that I've been around the farm a few times. I've seen a lot of crises come and go. I've seen people get upset about a lot of different things and a bit of a panic hysteria. I've seen a lot of those come and go. There's always like a panic. Like when I was younger, it was the Cold War. People were worried that, there was going to be nuclear weapons coming down on them at any moment, And that was like with them for years and years and years and years, They had that hanging over their heads. We don't really appreciate what that was like today, And I'm talking about, like, I'm in the West, I'm in Canada. So, I mean, that's where I'm coming from. People in Europe, you know exactly what I'm talking about if you're kind of in your 50s, 60s. You know what I mean? And since then, people have gotten upset about a lot of things. There's been financial crises. There's been all kinds of things going on with the stock market, all kinds of wars and conflicts going on around the world by, one thing or another. And I'm not dismissing them, but I'm saying that they come and they go. And at the time, especially when you're young, it feels like this is the end of the world. This is it. This is it. It's, nothing will be the same again. We've had like 1,000 years of history all to come down to this, and this is it. It'll be the end of all things. Nothing will be the same again, blah, blah, blah. That's how it feels. It always feels like that. But it's an illusion. I'm not saying that it's not real. It is real, but you know what? It comes and it goes. And sooner or later, people get back to normal. You make some kind of equilibrium. Like things get out of alignment. The pendulum swings one way, then it swings back. And keep that in mind. Get if you can, tell yourself that, because that is the reality, right? There's been a lot of panics and stuff before now. I mean, think about it. They went through the Great Depression. They went through World Wars I and II. They went through all kinds of stuff, right? That were bigger than what we've seen in the last several decades, right? And they came out on top, So at the end of the day, just keep that in mind. Politicians talk and countries do different things, and there's always like tensions, and there's always people being dumb, and there's always people not getting along. That's sort of been amplified with social media. It seems like we see more of it now because we're giving everyone a voice, right? Like you're watching me. I mean, who am I? I'm no one important, but you can see me. You can tune into what I'm saying if you want, right? We've given a voice to like everybody. And there's some morons out there, and there's some dangerous people, and there's some idiots out there, but now they have a voice. They can broadcast their idiocy and their stupidity and, their ignorance. There's also smart people too, and they're broadcasting, their advice and stuff, and that's a good thing, But the more things change, the more they stay the same. You know what I mean? These things come and go. So try to remember that, okay? It's normal when you're in your 20s to act like, because you're new, you act like this is like the end of everything, And it really isn't, okay? So just keep that in mind. Same with job situations, the economy. Economy goes down, the economy comes back up, right? It might be bad right now, but like you fast forward a year, you fast forward 2 years, people don't even remember. You have to think, oh yeah, I remember there was a time when things were bad. You're going to go on, okay? And you're going to be fine, right? One way or another. That's the thing. I mean, you're asking for my personal philosophy. That's what I'd say. I don't know if I can get into all the other things you hit me up for there, like, my philosophy and role models and everything. I could get into that in the future, but I don't know if anyone would be really interested in that. I'm more interested in helping you guys, I'm not here to talk about myself. I'm here to talk about what you're struggling with, and if I can help you to make things happen for you, if you're between jobs or something, or you're stuck in, I don't want to say stuck in life, but you know what I mean? Like if you're just not understanding what you see out in the world, and it's the world of business and employment and careers, I'm here to try and help you if I can. So that's the purpose of these. Ash says, hope you feel better. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day. You too, Ash. It's been a pleasure. Pleasure, my friend. There are 27 people here. I'm probably going to sign off now. I want to thank you for being here. If you want to go deeper into any of these topics, whether it's business or getting hired or improving yourself, check out my courses. I don't do one-on-one consulting. I've been asked that a lot lately. I don't do that. That would be very expensive anyway, charging like by the hour and all this kind of stuff. My courses are such a better bang for the buck anyway. And I have done some one-on-one kind of stuff with individuals before as an experiment, and I end up repeating like what I have in my courses. So it's much more efficient for everybody. If you want to go deeper with me, to check out some of these courses. Thank you for participating. I hope you all have a great weekend. If you're a Christian, you'll be celebrating Easter. Okay, so happy Easter. Happy Good Friday today. Happy Easter. If you're not, that's fine. You might have your own various celebrations around the world for different things. Best of luck to you. And if you're struggling with the whole job search thing, for the weekend, try and force yourself to do something fun. You got to take care of your mental health, or you won't be as effective in pushing for making something happen. Okay? Try to take care of yourself, and great things will happen. Always remember, you're awesome. I will see you guys next week. Take care.